Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another action-packed episode of Not That Bad. I am one of your hosts, Connor, aka Not Gabe, and I am joined today by an interesting group of people, starting off with my normal everyday co-host, yet the illustrious Gabe Tice. Mr. Tice, how you doing today, buddy?
Um, I feel like you're trying to replace me. You're bringing on another Gabe, just like a few episodes in.
I
So
had a hard time pointing on the screen to which one of you because you're both Gabe T's, so it was a hard time trying to
yeah,
differentiate you two. But I think I got it right. I think I pointed to the right one on my screen.
sure. Let's just keep bringing on other Gabes. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not intimidated at all. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great on my side, and welcoming an exciting guest today. Of course, we welcome Tony Crespo onto the show as our first ever guest, as a collaboration with Flopbuster. And this is his other side right here. This is the hot take man of Flopbuster himself. Have a great time watching you guys, Mr. Tornero, Gabe Tornero. How you doing today, dude?
Good, good. Thank you so much for the kind words. I greatly appreciate it. I'm excited to be on your guys' show. I watch it, when I can, and you guys always have so much fun.
Thanks, man. And I've become a really big fan of Flopbusters. Ever since we had Tony on, I think you guys do a great job. You have a great energy, and it's really exciting to be collaborating with y'all.
Yes, same here. Would you believe that me and Tony started off as like internet friends, and then
That's me and Connor, honestly. Yeah. No, me and
Yeah.
Connor met through a Facebook group. Tony was in that Facebook group too. Like 5 years ago.
About 5 years ago, yeah.
That's crazy, honestly.
Yeah, our first collab was around that time too, Gabe. And yeah, since then, we've been jumping in and doing the show. Ever since you guys started Flopbuster, which it actually started a lot like this show is, running through bad movies. Now you guys have an awesome format where you have 2 live shows a week. That'll be on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays, your big show. That's the show I am there every single week to try to enjoy, even though Tony blocked me one time, but I'm still having fun going in. If you guys are ever available on Tuesday nights or Thursday nights, 10:05 Eastern, 7:05 Pacific, definitely check out their live stream. Today, we're talking about a movie that was picked by Mr. Tornero here. Do you want to get into a little bit about what we're talking about today and what made you select the movie we're going to be talking about?
So what made me select it is, you gave me some parameters, right? So I was just like, okay. I know you guys have done a lot of horror, not a lot of science fiction. So I was like, you know what? Let's bring this in, and it's I got it right here, Battle of Los Angeles. Man, it is like I love like destruction and cities, just like destroying cities type of movies, like Independence Day, 2012 type stuff. And so I saw that this one was ranked pretty low, just hit right underneath your guys' parameters, and I was just like, let's do this one. It's rarely talked about, so I wanted to talk about it.
Oh, and very, very excited to get into it today as well. We'll get into a little bit more of the specifics a little bit later, but just so that everybody knows, this film is not the most beloved film when it comes to audience reactions. Letterboxd is what we will use on this show for those who are not familiar, to kind of follow what the audience gauge for a show is. When it comes to Battle Los Angeles, sits at a 2.3 out of 5, definitely under the 3 mark that we use on the show. Now, before we get into the good, I'd like to know everybody's background with this movie, starting with you, Mr. Tice. What's your background with this? What are your memories of it? Anything at all?
No memories. I did not see this in the theater. I vaguely remember seeing the poster, maybe the trailer. But I do have a background with the director, Jonathan Liebsman. He did a movie that I might suggest for this podcast, Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, which not a masterpiece, but I like that more than most. So knowing that, at least I was curious to check this out. Finally, I did not hear good things about it. That's why I never saw it. Yeah, without jumping ahead, I'll just say that this is going to be an interesting episode, I think. I'll just say that.
Well, happy to hear. And with your background of it too, it's kind of cool that we have this sort of different takes on everything, because you have very little background with it. For me, I remember vividly when these trailers started hitting my television sets. Every single time I watched TV, I'd see a trailer for this movie. The poster was everywhere. Every time you go to the theater, it was all over the place. They had big, in fact, growing up in the suburbs of Chicago at the time, they had big cutouts that were all over the theaters before this movie came out. So I remember vividly the trailer. Didn't know until recently that I had not seen this, and I know that sounds weird, but my brain pushes some movies out. I thought that might have been the case with this. Did not see it. Mr. Tornero, what's your history with Battle Los Angeles?
I see. I barely remember it going into theater, and it wasn't until I was doing the notes I was like, okay, so this got released. I thought this was a straight to like DVD type movie. I remember going into Blockbuster and seeing it on the new releases, flip over the cover and I see, Aaron Eckhart's in there, Michelle Rodriguez. I'm like, all right, let's check this out. And, the cover art got me and I was like, let's check it out. So that was how I got into it.
So you didn't see it in the theater?
No, I did not see it in the theater. And I'm sort of bummed that I didn't.
Because it came out in 2011?
Yeah, 2011.
Okay.
2011.
Yeah, so this was tail end of the Blockbuster era. As Blockbuster stores all over the country were closing, this movie was kind of coming out and doing something big. And it didn't do terrible numbers from what I understand. It was a bit of a flop for what they thought it would be. But of course, the audience reaction is why we're talking about it today. And we're definitely going to get into our personal negatives and the bad that the general audience thinks about this show. But let's see if we can get us started out in the good section here. And let's start off with our guest, Mr. Tornero. Do you want to start off with a pro that you have for this movie?
I think that the actors were really strong. And so I got to give that a pro. Aaron Eckhart, he always brings his A game. Michelle Rodriguez, like I mentioned beforehand, even the little parts that Neo, whatever his name is, played the artist. For the most part, the acting was solid. I think that was like what I would say is the best part of the movie. Also the destruction of Los Angeles when they, pan out and you see how LA is just completely destroyed. That's also a big plus for me because I always love seeing cities destroyed and leveled like that.
It's an interesting one too. And that's an excellent point that you brought up there with the good performances, because that's something that really did stand out for me. I don't think everybody was perfect. And I'll just say that right out. I think, there's going to be something that I'll get into once I get to my bad section, of course, the ugly, that I seem to agree with audiences on. However, the actors do a great job, and I think it's led and carried by Aaron Eckhart. He just knocks it out of the park for me. He does his absolute best with everything he's given. And he really he ups the emotional stakes in a movie that I feel like, according to some people, which we'll get into later, there are no emotional stakes for some of the characters, but I feel like he heightens that to a point where I truly did believe everything that he was saying. I truly believed everything that he was telling us and that he was experiencing through the movie. And I'm curious, Mr. Tice, I saw you give the thumbs up when when our other Gabe here was given that as a pro. It seems like you agree with this, yeah?
Specifically, and this was going to be my first pro, I totally agree on Aaron Eckhart. I'm a really big admirer of his work, especially from The Dark Knight. I actually think he's pretty underrated, given that Heath Ledger seems to overshadow so many other elements of that movie. But damn, is he great? And I really wish that they'd brought him back for the third movie. He doesn't seem to pick the best roles. No. He doesn't seem to pick the best projects.
Looking at you, I Frankenstein.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just thinking about that one.
I think that was like the nail in the coffin. And I'm always wondering, like, what happened to Aaron Eckhart? Like, that guy was poised to be, I think, a major presence. But I think this is like his only big starring role in some kind of blockbuster, wide release movie, which is a shame because he's so good at this. Like, y'all, like, not to give the game away. I don't have a lot of things that I liked about this movie, but he was so powerful in what he could do that he basically boosted it to another star, like on my rating, and I have some scenes that I want to highlight as pros, and those scenes work because of his performance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And with what you said too, Mr. Tornero here, this is weird not saying Gabe for each of you, but we're gonna get through the episode just fine. With what you said about the destruction, I mean, the destruction is a really cool thing to see throughout the film. But I think another thing that's really cool about this movie, if I could introduce a pro, would be the true like scope and horror behind the story of this. This is not a horror movie. Don't get me wrong when I'm saying the horror, but thinking about the fact that you could just be living your normal day life, hear about this meteor shower that's happening, and next thing you know, you and your entire family are wiped out by a race of aliens. As somebody who definitely thinks that there could be some sort of life out there somewhere, I think that the universe is so massive that you never know what's out there waiting. And to
They
think
could already
that
be here.
They could already be here. They could already be amongst us, among us. Wow. Sorry, I just need to get that in there. The kids that listen to the show will pop huge for that. But no, in all actuality, I think when you really think about the concept of this movie, it's an awesome concept to have. It's not the first time we've seen it done. Maybe not the best execution of the concept, but I think it's something that, like in this film, it's a really cool thing to see. And I think in the beginning, especially, it progresses really well. We sort of see it in the middle when we first open the film. And then we kind of slowly pace into it, seeing little clips of CNN. Love the CNN plug in there, by the way. That didn't make any sense to me. But yeah, it's a really cool concept. And it plays in really heavily to just thinking about the fact that, Mr. Tornero and I, being from the Chicagoland area, imagine just looking out and seeing the skyline just decimated and large ships above it. It's just a terrifying thing to think of. And I'm curious, Mr. Tornero, what do you think of that aspect of the film? Is that something you'd add as a pro as well?
It would be something that would add as a pro. I mean, I think when you live in a big city, whether it be Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Houston, what have you, is you have to think about these, because let's just say it's not aliens, right? We live in an era where there could be some sort of bomb, atomic bomb hitting, whatever, and you're looking at an area that you're going to get decimated. And so when you go into these like destruction movies, I feel that's something you have to keep in the back of your mind. Like, okay, like let's say aliens come to Chicago, like where am I going? Like what's going to happen with me? Am I going to do like Michael Pena and hide out at the police station with some kids, or am I gonna go and try to fight these characters or whoever, aliens or what have you? So it's something that, as far as destruction movies are concerned, like you always have to like keep that in mind and just see what you're gonna do, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to think about too, putting yourself in that position. But yeah, it's something that I think is great. And now, Mr. Tice, I'm curious with you. I know you said you don't have a lot of great things to say about the movie, which I don't want to exhaust all your resources too fast here. But I'd love to hear your second pro here before we turn it back over to Mr. Tornero here. What pro would you introduce on your side?
Well, I would just like to talk about a few scenes that really stood out to me. Now, Michael Pena's character has a family, has a wife and a son, and spoiler, he dies at some point. And Aaron Eckhart has to comfort this son, this little boy. That scene almost felt like it was from a different movie. Not just because I felt like it was a different quality, but just like the emotion, the intensity.
Right.
I just felt like everything came together. I really liked the cinematography. It's a very kind of like very moody lit scene, but I could still see what was going on, which that's a little foreshadowing to a negative I have. But there's that scene, and then immediately it's followed by a scene of him and kind of confronting this sergeant that's giving him some attitude because of something in his past. And I don't know how well that scene is written, but Aaron Eckhart, like that's what happens when you get an A-list actor, a high caliber actor. They can like make it sound like Shakespeare. And that's what he does with that scene. So that was a real like 1-2 punch right there.
And they're one after the other.
Right, exactly.
Right.
It kind of comes in a little too late for my liking. And again, it kind of came out of nowhere as far as I was concerned. But I have to acknowledge that those were two really great scenes that helped pick my interest back up. When the movie, was kind of like when I wasn't totally into the movie by that point.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I get you. Like you said, it's sort of like you got so much like war going on and conflict, and they're running away and they're hiding, and all of a sudden there's like this huge emotional scene,
Yeah.
where he's confronting, the brother of the guy that he was with in the previous platoon, and then he's like, he helps, console Michael Pena's kid. Like all of a sudden, it's like you said, it came out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden that scene was done, and it's back to war.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish there's so much running around in the movie, and that's cool because this is an action movie. That's what the audience came for, and I can respect the energy they were going for, but even just a small scenes like these very human moments between characters goes a long way, and that's what like separates like a Dawn of the Dead, like both the Romero and Snyder version from like a lower tier movie in this genre, in my opinion.
Yeah. And let's not undersell this too. Like that scene as a whole, I think from the time that the soldier comes in and relays to Aaron Eckhart's character that Michael Pena's character has passed away, to the moment that they finish that confrontation with the brother character. It's heavy stuff. Like I'm not a pretty good example of this because I'm weird with death and stuff, but like I was like getting choked up watching. I was like, oh my, like where I didn't expect it. And I'm sitting here like taking my glasses off, like, oh, okay, all right, hold on.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is a war movie. What's going on?
Right. He's like, he's like, oh, you don't know what I go through. And he starts rattling off everybody's like name and, badge number and stuff. And then, he finishes with Michael Pena. He's like, oh, and, and a civilian who, had no fight in this. And he takes up a gun and he helps us. I was like, damn, that was good.
And the other actors in those scenes are really good too. Like,
oh yeah,
the soldier he's talking to without any lines, like you see him go through a total transformation.
The kid, I need to highlight the
really
kid.
Good.
Oh my god, the kid is sobbing his eyes out over Michael Pena's dead body, and then when he's trying to suck it up, and he's Marines never quit, and I was like, this kid is fucking rocking it right now.
Yeah. So that goes back to your point, other Gabe, about the cast here. I mean, not everybody knocks it out of the park, but I would really say that was the script's fault. But it had an opportunity to raise the stakes, and it did that. And you got to give props. And it's very rare that a movie can do that after really not doing much to set it up. Like that's why it came out of nowhere for me. Like I know they allude to Aaron Eckhart's past, but just like this thing that they kind of give lip service to, I really didn't think they would do much with that. And I was wrong. The movie proved me wrong, which is pretty cool.
No, absolutely. I get what you mean. It's that's why I like it. It comes from a very unexpected place, and I'm not just talking about that part, but like there's so much more from this that I get that it becomes unexpected from other destruction movies that that I've seen in the past.
Yeah, so it differentiates itself to me. There are parts of it that seem clone-ish, I guess you could say, but that comes with the territory in the genre. I mean, you can watch anything. I mean, something that I think we're all fans of. I know you talked about this on Flopbuster just past when we're recording this, but like slasher movies, for example, are something that I think a lot of people get enjoyment out of, but it's hard not to watch a slasher movie and pick out 40 things that you've seen in another one or that you'll see in ones that come after it. So it's funny that the disaster category sometimes is treated unfairly, I think, in that regard, because there's only so much you can do with the disaster piece. It's kind of the things you build up around it that make it what it is. But is there another pro that you wanted to highlight, Mr. Tornero?
For this, I mean, besides, like we've talked about the acting and the coming out of nowhere type, to me, I really want to highlight, how awesome, I know we talk about Aaron Eckhart, but also like Michelle Rodriguez a lot in this. I really like it's not her strongest performance, but it's not also her weakest.
Not even close.
I really like her. I really like her. I really like her character, and I really like her as an actress. So I think she always plays that tough girl, tomboy, like to a T. And it's like I feel like every movie that she's in, she's playing a version of herself because she comes off as authentic in that. So I feel like that's how she really is. And I think if you read the tabloids, she's like really like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is like I didn't look over the cast of this movie before I watched it. And I remember reaching the scene where she shows up, and I literally have it down in my pros here. Holy shit, Michelle Rodriguez is in this. I had no idea she was in this. And so when she showed up, it was a real treat for me because I love Michelle Rodriguez. I was a kid that grew up on the Resident Evil movie, the very first one. So seeing Michelle Rodriguez pop up in this one, anytime she pops up in anything, I'm happy. So it was really cool to see her in this. And I think you're right. I think honestly, and this is going to sound kind of strange to say, but because she didn't have to be as like, for lack of a better term, tomboyish as she is in the Fast and Furious movies, I think it was really cool that she felt like, I feel like her most authentic in this. Yeah. She's not too tough. She's not too tomboyish. I think she's being Michelle Rodriguez as a soldier in this. And I believe that she is. And I think the parts of her performance that don't feel as strong as maybe she would have done in another film are less to do with her and more to do with another aspect of the movie that will, of course, I'll be covering later. But no, I thought it was cool being in this. I'm glad you mentioned her. I think she kind of enhances anything that she's in just from noticing that she's in it. And I'm curious, Mr. Tice, if that's not one of your pros, I'd like to hear if you have any more for us.
I've never seen this woman's movies. I've never seen the Resident Evil movies. I've never seen the Fast and Furious movies.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no. Don't tell me you've never seen the Fast and Furious movies.
I've never seen this woman's films before. I'm sure she's lovely, and I'm sure she could kick my ass, so I'm going to be nice. Wow. I thought she was playing one of the weaker characters, I guess is my main problem. Like she shows up, it's one of those really awkward scenes where she just has to give a huge exposition dump to even justify why she's in the movie all of a sudden.
Right.
And then from there, I feel like she never really gels with the team and never forms a real relationship with anybody. Yeah. So unfortunately, I didn't really perk up when I saw her. I recognized her. I was like, oh, cool. As far as my pros go, there are some impressive shots, especially the wide shots of Los Angeles burning down. I think if I was bigger into the genre, I would have a better time with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, since you don't have really anything else to bring to the pros column, I want to highlight one. I've kind of touched on a full list of them. I have quite a bit listed here, but I've kind of touched on them as we talked about some of these. But one that I want to highlight that I haven't really talked about yet is the ending of the movie. The very end, as cheesy as it is, I love the hell out of it. I love the fact that the team shows up just beaten down. They deserve their break. Even the other guy says it deserves your break. They all suit up. And then there's that final shot of the helicopters flying. And you hear that "let's take back Los Angeles" call. And as cheesy and trope filled as that was, I loved the hell out of it. I loved it so much. I felt like in a movie like this, where it is so contested throughout, and there's so many things that you can highlight as either a pro or a con, depending on how you felt about the movie, I felt like it's really important to finish strong. And that's something that I felt when watching it. It's really important that this movie finishes strong. I felt like they did. I was really satisfied with that ending. And I really just needed to throw that in there as a pro, because it's one of the biggest ones that I have for the film. And I'm curious what you think about that, Mr. Tornero.
I love the ending. Like you said, there's a certain level of cheesiness that one has to take into consideration whenever you're watching a destruction movie, because yes, they've all been done before, right? I mean, one of the first ones was that I can remember is King Kong, right? The black and white King Kong. He's destroying the Empire State Building or whatever. I would consider that one of the first ones.
I say so.
So you have to take a level of cheesiness for all this, because it's all been said and done. I mean, you have, The Day After Tomorrow. That one's, how many movies? Like you have 2012. That's sort of the same as The Day After Tomorrow. So it's all these movies sort of run up to each other, and each one has to have its own level of cheesiness. And I thought this one had just the right level. Like you said, at the end, when it's like, oh, we don't need a break. Let's take back Los Angeles, and they go back out there and they fight. It's expected out of this crew. Like you see them go through everything, all the deaths and everything they've gone through, and they're like, you know what? I don't want to rest. Let's go out and let's go fight. There's nothing else that we can do at this point. Like, Los Angeles is torn down. Like, what else can you do? It's not like you could go to, the Hollywood or check out the Walk of Fame or whatever, So they're like, let's go fight again.
Mr. Tice?
Yeah, the ending didn't really do it for me.
I could tell by your expressions. I was like, when we get to him, he's not going to have any nice things to say about this.
Hey, okay. I really don't want to be mean to a movie that it looks like a lot of work went into it. Let me explain it this way. After how mopey and humorless and like how much this movie took itself seriously, that ending with that amount of cheese just really, it came out of nowhere in the complete wrong direction. And I don't know. Imagine if at the end of The Dark Knight, Batman's riding off on his little bat motorcycle and he's like, now it's time to save Gotham, or like something like that, because I feel like they really did want a Dark Knight level of grit, and they ended with an Independence Day level of cheese, and just was an awkward note to end on. Also, it screams, give me a sequel. And of course, a sequel was never given to them. So
not yet.
There should have been a sequel. I think Aaron Eckhart said he's all up for a sequel.
Bring it back.
Why not, right? I mean, if we're going to keep giving sequels to all of these other properties, yeah, sure, give.
I mean, Independence Day got a sequel. As bad as I love Independence Day. It's it's like the top 3 destruction movies for me. But that one got a sequel, and that sequel was so terrible.
Yeah,
I never even saw the sequel. Nope, not doing it.
I couldn't do it either. But no, I mean, you raise an excellent point there, because it did leave it sort of, it either left it open to interpretation of what happened next, which I feel like that's something that movies that don't directly say, like, we'll be back, right, guys? Like you're sort of leaving it open to, yes, there will be a sequel, or if there's not a sequel, what do you think happens next? And it's kind of left up. And for me, I like to think, happy endings all around. Don't say that in a massage parlor, but if you're talking about this movie, very happy to say, I hope that they went on to, that was offhand. I'm sorry about that, but
I don't think Robert Kraft is in here. So
I don't think, Robert Kraft's not here. Although the NFL season is starting, so maybe that's why. Maybe he's a little busy, but I'm sure he'll chart a flight soon. In all seriousness, though, I like to think that this movie, because we didn't get that sequel, and because we still have not gotten it, and hopefully one day, I really, no matter what you think about it, I think it's one of those movies that has the potential to raise the stakes in a sequel. We've already seen this group defeat this. You don't even have to bring back the same people. Truthfully, I mean, we see that this is not just a battle that's happening in Los Angeles. We are only getting the perspective of the battle in Los Angeles. London is under attack. Paris is under attack. Cities all over the world. So
right.
There's a lot of opportunity for this. I'm really sad that wasn't explored just because of how this movie was received, because there really could have been a lot to explore. You could have brought a whole new cast in, a whole new writing staff, and I think it would have felt in place with the storytelling that they had in this, no matter what you did. So I'm sad to see that didn't happen, but because it didn't, the ending is open to interpretation. So, on top of it being something that I really enjoyed looking at and experiencing after the story that I saw, I thought it's kind of cool that, in a way we can kind of just assume what happened next to these guys.
Yeah. Which they probably just ended up dying at the end.
Oh, they're 100% dead. But yeah. I like to think, like I said, happy endings all around. Real quick before, obviously we have touched on a lot of good so far. And I think I'm happy to see that there's a lot of good that's been brought up. But before we move on to the bad, did anybody have anything else they wanted to highlight?
For the good?
Yeah, for the good.
For the good, man. I don't know, just I know we've touched on the acting, the end scene, Michael Pena, and to me that's all good. I think that for me at least, like all that just I don't know, elevates it in a sense, the destruction of Los Angeles. Um, I oh that's I think that's for me at least that's as much good as I have for it. I know it's one of my favorites, but I can't really think of anything else for it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, is like what's important for people to notice that, you could have two good things to say about a movie, but if those good things are some of the best things that you can possibly say, or they're weighted very heavily for you, you could have a million bad things to say and two good things to say, and it can end up being a movie that you rate very highly.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that seems to be something that's going to happen here on your end, Mr. Tice. I can already see where
he's ready. He's
come on,
I think
don't
this
do
is
that.
I know where this is gonna end up for you, which is
I
no
don't want to
problem
be
there.
the villain of this podcast.
No villains, no villains. Look, nobody's a villain in the world of movie opinions. So at the end of the day,
people who don't like the Rob Zombie Halloweens are villains to me. That's a different.
Oh man, we could definitely agree with that. So
obligatory.
Tony Crespo's
yeah,
out.
Oh my god. You know what? We welcomed him onto this show, okay? and then about a week later, I'm watching Flopbuster. I see that Joker go on there and defend that Joker sequel, right? With the musical and all that stuff that hasn't come out. I get it. You give it the shot, whatever. But then he goes on to talk in the same episode about how Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 wasn't good. I made the obligatory reference along with Gabe today. I'm done with it. Tony, we are calling you out, and I can't wait because I think after this episode comes out, we're going to be appearing on Flopbuster just after that. This episode is going to drop and we'll be on Flopbuster right after.
And guess which movie we're supposed to talk about?
Let's say we're ready to talk to Mr. Crespo about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into Gabe Tice's favorite part of this episode.
Oh, come on.
The bad.
Okay. All right.
And why don't you kick us off, Mr. Tice?
I do have I have a lot of notes.
You have a scroll of the bad in this.
Yeah, like an ancient scroll that I discovered in a temple.
Actually, he sent me a copy of his notes to how bad they were. It's like all these pages worth of bads.
It was nice of you to send him the notes ahead of time so he can tear you apart when he.
That even looks like my handwriting. So okay. I don't want to sit here and nitpick the whole movie. I think the big overarching problem I had is it never justified its existence to me. I don't know why the movie was made. I don't know what the filmmakers wanted us to take away from the experience. It seemed like it was trying to be a lot of different movies, and it was an unfortunate formula for me. Like, it was like, I guess if Paul Greengrass directed Independence Day, or if Michael Bay directed The Hurt Locker, Jonathan.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Jonathan Liebsman is like Michael Bay's protege. Like, he came up working through Michael Bay's production company. And
he directed Turtles as well, that Michael Bay produced.
Right. And Michael Bay produced the Texas Chainsaw prequel and the original. So I think where I'm going with that is I see a lot of Michael Bay's quirks here without a lot of the style that makes those enjoyable to at least some people. A lot of people really dig Michael Bay, and I don't like to hate on the guy or anything, but yeah, it just felt drab, humorless. There were attempts and nods at like character stuff, but it only came out in the last 30 minutes for me with those two scenes. And without those scenes, I would be much harsher than I am being right now, believe it or not. Maybe I sound like an asshole, but I was ready to like, yeah, so that's my big problem. We can go into the nitty gritty details, but yeah, it just never came together for me. I don't know. It was just an awkward mishmash of like, all of these are cool movies that Liebsman is trying to replicate. I just don't think he understood what makes those movies work.
Okay, yeah, and
that's fair.
That's a fair point, and that's the thing too, is like Michael Bay directing The Hurt Locker was almost like a perfect. I would say more so like Michael Bay directing Black Hawk Down,
Yeah,
because
Black
it's
Hawk
much
Down with
more of like a
aliens.
scope. But that was almost the perfect way to put it. I think like that modern style of like war movies, just with Michael Bay's touch with and I will say too, without some of Michael Bay's charming things. That's not to say I don't think this film had any charm to it. I think it actually did, and it actually helped my enjoyment a lot. I felt like this did have a bit of a charm to it. But I see what you're saying. I mean, one of the things that bothered me the most about it was, you have all these explosions, and I think the cityscape, and there are some great shots in this, but the levels of like shaky cam and the parts that there are bad shots really overshadowed the moments where there are good shots in the movie. I came away from this thinking more about the bad camera movements and angles and everything that had to do with how the movie was shot. The bad parts I retained more than the good parts. And I hate to say that about a movie, because the look of a movie is very important to me. There are movies that are total shit, but if it looks good, I'm going to think it's a good movie. I can be easily tricked. Okay. I'm a manipulatable guy in that regard. I'm really sad to say that a movie like this, that I think really could have benefited from like a mix of like a Tarantino style of camera movements, very gliding and easy to go with, but also sort of like a blend of, and I hate to say this because I'm not the biggest fan of this guy. I'm also not the biggest detractor of this guy, but I think J.J. Abrams does a good job of shooting films like this. With some of the things that he does with camera tricks. That style of filmmaking is kind of what I would have expected from Battle Los Angeles going in. And I didn't get it. And that was the part that I think I didn't connect with. And I'm curious, with the 2 points that we've raised so far, Mr. Tornero, it's very weird addressing you so formally, but what say you about this? And once you touch on that, if you could introduce your first bad point, I would love to hear it.
All right. So what I would say is this. I would agree with you as far as the camera work, right? Sometimes it feels like it wants to be like a found footage type of film, with the shaky camera, things like that. And it doesn't work for me. Like if they would just had like the steady cam and they did like the nice, beautiful, crisp pictures without the shakiness of it, I think it would work out even better than it does for me. Then And I get what you're saying there, Gabe, with the, what he's trying to do is, do like a hodgepodge of all these different movies. But there's a certain element that I come into with these like movies, like, it's sort of like, it's like a popcorn movie for me, right? It's summer blockbuster where I'm just going to go in and I'm going to turn off my brain and I'm just going to eat popcorn and just watch explosions. In fact, I wish a movie had more explosions than it does. Like, I wish it was the Michael Bay, explosion everything type of situation, except for giving me like, certain explosions here and there. But this type of movie for me it's one of those that I don't have to sit there and be like, all right, is this going to be an Oscar winner? Like, what's going on here? Like, these types of movies for me is you sit there and you just eat popcorn and just enjoy what's going on the screen.
Yeah.
That being all said, I didn't like the aliens. I thought the aliens were weak as fuck. So I don't know. Sorry, could I swear? I don't know.
No, yeah. Say whatever the fuck you want.
Please, come on.
Whatever the fuck you want.
The aliens were so weak to me. Like, you come in here and you decide that, and you put the aliens in, and they're water-based aliens, and they're trying to suck up all the water nutrients. So then why the hell are they going inland where there is no water? Like, for example, terrible movie, right? It's another destruction movie. They try to make it out of a movie out of a board game, Battleship, right? In Battleship, all those aliens stayed in water. It was the Navy fighting aliens in water. If your aliens are going to be water-based, why are they marching out of the coastline, out of the beaches? Why are they going into like the streets? Like, wouldn't you want to stay in the beach where you get all your power from?
You would think so, right? And that was the thing too, is like they introduced something that they tried to make sense of it with, when they talked about like how they were going to use the sewer systems to funnel the water from the ocean to the ship. But then wouldn't you just park the ship in the water?
Right.
If you're going to funnel the water there anyways, just put it in the water.
I kind of can't believe that they went out of their way to like explain why the aliens are attacking. It's not an explanation that gives any sort of depth to these
What?
villains.
How do
They're
they
still,
know? Did they interview the aliens?
I didn't see any. I didn't see them carry a giant ass straw and plunge it right into the Atlantic.
Although that would have been great.
That would have been hilarious.
It would have brought this movie to a Killer Clowns level for me.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, I think. So to be clear, when I say it's like Michael Bay doing the Hurt Locker, I wish it was more Michael Bay. I want that fun time at the movies, you know. I don't love Independence Day, but I certainly get why people watch it and celebrate it, why it got a sequel all these years later. Because that movie does not take itself seriously. My problem is this movie was trying to bring some sort of gravitas to a premise that I don't think needed it. Let me bring up a good example. Has anybody here seen Dog Soldiers?
I don't think I have.
Who's in it?
It was like a British production. It's about these soldiers who fight off a whole horde of werewolves. It's like a really great movie, like a great B movie. But it's not.
Check that out.
Yeah, highly recommended. And it's not afraid to be a B movie. It takes itself seriously enough for the audience to care what's going on, but it's not afraid and it's not embarrassed about what it is. And I almost feel like this movie was like, and the aliens are so charmless and they're so bland and they're so boring because a creative design might have seemed too silly.
Right.
So let's just make them look like drones or something, you know, or like Ed 209s. That's what they reminded me of, honestly. Like Ed 209s, like these thin ass like Ed 209s that went on a diet.
Yeah, they had like those big ass heads with like these skinny little bodies, and then when they go in and they dissect one, it's like they go through like 10 different layers to like get into like the actual place where they could kill them. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, shoot to their heart. It's like, well, you had to dissect it, and each level you're dissecting, you're like hitting it with a knife and it's not dying. So what would a bullet go through like 12 layers of whatever layer that they have to like kill them automatically with a bullet? Like,
my God.
That's the aspect that I hated about it so much.
Well, and that's the thing too, and I think I can use this as a time to bring up one of the cons that I have, and this really made me laugh out loud watching this movie, and it has to do with what both of you just said there. This movie takes itself seriously to a point where it faults itself at sometimes because the writing, and I'm not a fan of the writing of this. I'll get into it when we get to the bad or to the ugly, excuse me, because it's something that a lot of people had problems with this movie for. But there's one piece of dialogue in particular that just blew me away with how absolutely dumb it was. And it's when they're getting ready to dissect the creature and that woman steps up and goes, "I think I can help. I'm a veterinarian." What, bitch? What are you gonna help with?
She's a veterinarian for animals and aliens.
She even says that at one point. She says only animals and aliens. Fuck you. No. Any one of them could have cut open that thing. Nobody cares that you're a veterinarian. You just want to sneak that in there. It made no sense in the movie. It highlighted so many of the points of what I have against it. Because if you're going to take it seriously, then take it seriously. Don't put dumb shit like that in the movie.
Right.
But if you aren't going to take it seriously, that would have been so funny if she was just like, "I'm a vet." And then they all looked at her like she was fucking crazy because it's a crazy thing to say when they're getting ready to cut open an alien. So it's like, it counts against all the things that I have against the movie as a whole. There are other problems that you have with it, but it's not a good piece of dialogue at all. It's not a good thing to introduce because it's silly as hell. And it wouldn't have been so silly if the movie didn't take itself so seriously at every single point. So yeah, I just to encapsulate what both of you kind of said there into one moment, that takes everything into account. That scene itself, I think, should not have been there. I think they could have done a much more creative way of finding out how to kill these things, even if it was just blow them up. I would have been totally fine if they were just like, well, we shot the shit out of it, but when we blew it up, it didn't get up. So I would have been fine with that. Just if you're going to put something so silly in there, then make it a silly movie, or don't put it in there at all.
There's another moment I want to bring up because it in contrast highlights what I'm talking about. Like there's a scene where they're driving away in one of those SUVs and the aliens on the hood, and Michelle Rodriguez shoots at it, and I think it like the blood gets in her mouth or something. It's kind of like a gross effect, and like the driver laughs and he's like, "Oh, you let him do you on the first date." That was funny. That, and like it was also like this kind of like fun campy moment. I was like, more of that.
Mhm.
Where was any of that for the whole movie? It could have been something out of Evil Dead or something
Right.
like that. But this is about the military, so it has to be the most macho,
Hoorah!
like patriotic, and that's another thing about Michael Bay. He has like an obsession with the military, like the might of the military. And that this movie to me almost felt more like a recruitment ad than a movie
For the
like,
Marines.
Yeah, exactly. And
Semper Fi, motherfucker.
spoiler alert, I ain't joining the fucking Marines after watching this. So
Marines don't quit, Gabe.
I'm too old to join any sort of military branch, so I tried actually when I was younger.
I just want to say before we continue, I'm so happy to see your trademark cherry Pepsi. Happy to see it make an appearance on our show.
Always.
We are not sponsored, but if Pepsi does want to sponsor us, we will certainly welcome it. But I'm just happy to see that there. But no, I'm curious because I know that you brought up your point there, Mr. Tornero, about what you didn't like so far. But is there another huge point that you have against the film in the bad section?
Yeah, some of the CGI does not work at all.
It doesn't age well, I can tell you that.
It did not age well. I watched it yesterday or the day before, and I'm looking at this and I was like, okay, I know that I enjoy this movie, right? And I was like, but the CGI at some moments is so cringy. It's like it was done in 2011, so it shouldn't even be that bad. Because we obviously we all see movies from 60s, 70s, 80s that they age well. But the CGI in this just was not good. Also, there's a scene, and we were talking about scenes. The scene that I thought was sort of like incredulous with the writing, and they didn't know what to do with these aliens, is they're on the bus, and then the drones are coming in, and again they're like they try to shut down all communications or whatever so that the drones wouldn't find out where their location is. So it's like, how many more aspects are you going to add to these aliens? Like, okay, so they're water based, and now they could they see you, could they not see, could only see based on radio comms. Like, what's going on? Like, why are you stopping the bus? Why are you turning off communications? Like, just stop. And then Aaron Eckhart goes off and goes all John Wayne and goes off on his own to do this little gas station bombing. And I'm just like, okay, like that's a little far-fetched that one military person is going to go through all that. They're going to stop the bus, turn off communications. Like, at that point, I'm not gonna say like I disliked it, and I thought that aged really bad.
Yeah. Although honestly, that was one of the better scenes in my opinion. Like the action was shot better, and I don't want to belabor this. Just I don't think the action is shot well at all throughout the film. Neither the cinematography and the lighting or the camera work. It's just unfortunate. But that was actually a scene where it was a pretty cool little cat and mouse between Aaron Eckhart and that flying drone. I think it's hilarious that just an explosion can take down an alien spacecraft like that. Like I would not be scared if these aliens landed on Earth. I'll tell you that. But yeah, that scene was fine, and honestly, the CGI made me laugh, so I appreciate it.
well, that's the thing too, is like there is, and don't get me wrong, there is some CGI that I think really does work. I think a lot of the shots of this like control panel or mothership thing are pretty well done. It's a pretty well crafted piece of CGI. But when it gets into some of like the movements of the drones and the aliens, I think that's really where it screams at you that it's aged very poorly. And that's the thing that you brought up too. I mean, just around this time, movies that had a much lower budget than this one were doing much bigger and better things with CGI throughout most of the film. Not perfect in 2011. Don't get me wrong. I mean, right. I've seen Man with the Iron Fists. I know it's not completely perfect. But at the same token, I think it deserves some credit where it does do well. And the thing I will say too is like I completely agree with you with it seems a little far-fetched that this is something that the military would do. I kind of was able to dismiss that a little bit because I guess unconventional war brings unconventional tactics. Like we've seen that in a lot of war movies. As somebody who grew up absolutely loving everything to do with the military, I'd watch the military channel. I'd watch every war movie that I could. For the longest time, Saving Private Ryan was my favorite film. And we see things in Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down, which are based technically on true wartime events, where, you know, we see unconventional warfare take place. And in this one, it's a little far-fetched, especially, you know, considering when he gets back on the bus, they literally say that was some John Wayne shit. And it was
a John Wayne reference in the year of our Lord 2011.
And you know what's really funny is I loved that. I really did love that part of the dialogue where the kid up front driving the bus is like, "Who's John Wayne?" Because he didn't know, he was too young to know John Wayne. So I kind of dug that. But
that's funny.
Nine years later, a lot of people still don't know who John Wayne is.
And it's less and less people are going to know every year because Westerns are getting, you don't even get me started on Westerns, man. I love them so much. So sad to see that they're not in, that only Quentin Tarantino can bring them back and nobody else. But yeah, I mean, the CGI is a big point. And, you know, one of the things I have to say too, is like, we talked about the good performances. There are some bad performances, looking at you, Neo. But that's not even a big point that I have against the movie. Honestly, I really,
Time out, Neo, the singer. He's in this movie.
He is. He's the dude with the glasses who's going to get married.
I kind of liked it. I kind of
really
liked him.
Okay,
I sort of liked this character.
Wow. Okay. See, I was one of those people who didn't love him too much. I thought there were some other actors in the film that didn't do great. I really liked that guy who died in like that tower. You know, when it got blown up towards the end of the movie, I felt like he could play like Biff in a remake of.
He's the guy from True Blood.
Yeah. Like he was the soldier with the PTSD issues, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I kind of think it was almost disrespectful the way he died, given that he was going through that experience, and it felt like the movie had an opportunity to really say something about PTSD other than well, it doesn't matter now because you got blown up by a spaceship.
Well, he confronted his PTSD. That's probably the message they got. He confronted his PTSD and he was able to, get blown up for it.
Yeah. So maybe you should have run away like a coward, dog. I don't know. That was such a like those sacrificial scenes are supposed to be really tear jerking, and that was really funny to me. Like just the way he turned around and he cut to this wide shot of it blowing him up.
His was a little comedic. I did like the other sacrifice scene, and I don't know if that's going to be controversial because I saw quite a few reviews shitting all over it. I really dug it because I think it adds an element of like it bared the weight that it was supposed to. He hands off the letter to the wife, which is a trope that we see in a lot of war movies. Give this to my wife, but then he sacrifices himself, and I think it was done pretty well for a good reason. And I thought it did what it was supposed to do. But his death, the other gentleman that we just spoke of with PTSD, it was comedic to me. The fact that he just turned and got blown up. I thought for sure it would be one of those scenes where like he turns and then gets blown off of it, like loses a leg, and they have to carry him through the rest of the film. Maybe they attach a gun to his leg, like that Robert Rodriguez movie, and that's how he continues.
Planet Terror.
Yeah. Oh, love that movie.
Yeah, I wish Robert Rodriguez had directed this movie.
It would have been really interesting.
So how many sacrificial deaths do you think you could have in a movie? And because this one had 3 or 4, I think they lost their meaning because you had Michael Pena, you had dude from True Blood. You had the guy on the highway by the bus. There's 3 of them at least where they sacrificed themselves for the greater good, and I think it just lost all its meaning when you do it, especially like an hour and a half movie.
Oh, and by the way, just to get into my final con that I want to bring up in the bad section here, this movie feels long as fuck. Okay, I don't have a problem sitting through a movie that's like 3 hours long. But there was a point where I was like, holy shit, like how much of this movie is left? Because they give you, I call it the original Star Wars effect, where they give you an ending of the movie and then they give you more endings of the movie. In Star Wars, they only give you one extra ending, right? You could have ended it in Star Wars at a certain point, but then they took you to the Death Star scene, and it makes the movie feel a little longer than it is. But I love Star Wars, and I think it has a ton of charm. And I think in this one, they give you 3 points where you could have cut this movie off and the audience would have been satisfied with what they were given. I felt I would have been satisfied at those points, but they didn't end it. And it just kept going. And for an hour and 56-minute movie, it felt every millisecond of an hour and 56 minutes. And that's just something I have to bring up. And it sounds like I'm shitting on the movie for that. And there's a lot of good that I have to say. And obviously we don't know where I'm going to land on it yet, but God, this movie was long.
Wow.
It was a little, it felt a little long. You're right. I mean, I watched it at like 6 a.m. The other day, and it was like 8 o'clock when I was done. I was like, I can't believe this was a 2-hour movie. I was like, all right.
I had to take a lot of breaks to finish this movie. I'm not gonna lie. I think I finally like got into this nice stretch with the movie in the last 30 minutes. Because they had a target now. They had to take down that District 9 looking thing. That's another con I have. That was such a rip off of District 9.
It does look a lot like District 9.
Center.
You know, I was thinking about where I've seen it throughout the whole movie. And
then the aliens reminded me a little bit of Chappie. Just a
little bit. But District 9 was just like a few years before this. So I really was like shocked that they actually had the gall to do that. But at least they had a target now, because most of the movie just feels like them running around. And I think that's why it dragged so much, like without an objective, without a purpose. You know, when you're just watching people run around trying to survive, you know, and there's no structure or momentum to it. Yeah, it does drag, because you're just like, well, when's this going to end? Like, what are we striving for? So I agree with you, Connor. The movie was longer than it had to be. I think if they had just set out an objective early on for the audience to like understand, okay, this is what our heroes are trying to accomplish, like the Death Star, they want to blow up the Death Star in Star Wars. It wouldn't have dragged. It's not a runtime thing. It's a structure thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, and I hate to say this because like I'm being a big fan of action movies. Like a lot of times, you know, especially in a movie, like if somebody's not enjoying it, which I think a lot of people in this type of movie, from what I've read in the reviews, were not enjoying it. I feel like getting into the action is a really good thing, but in this film, I felt like it really could have benefited from a little bit more buildup. And I think we should have gotten more moments with these characters before. And I get that people talk about how bland the characters are in their opinion, and that's something we'll get into in the ugly. But spending more time with those characters would have given us time to actually slowly get into the action and then build it to a final crescendo in the destruction of Los Angeles. And I feel like we spent an okay amount of time with the characters, but then it's like, boom, we are right into the heat of it. They are going to this base and they are going to fight these aliens, and it just happens. And I felt like some of the build was really cool. You know, I really liked the fact that they were building it up with these, you know, TV screens, and they were showing the progression of, you know, oh, these, you know, meteors might come to Earth, to, oh, they're going to hit a few places, to, oh, we're evacuating the city, to, holy shit, these are not meteors. I kind of dug that. But we didn't spend enough time with these characters. And, you know, you can't just introduce somebody and say, oh, hey, you're getting married, and then expect everybody to be like, oh, well, like, yeah, like, I care about this guy now. You know, it's like, right, all you did was tell us he's getting married. Spend more time with these characters. And I felt like the runtime would have been an advantage.
Right. Because you felt like you didn't have anything emotionally invested in these characters as soon as they died. See, now another bad for me for this though. Are we doing spoilers? I guess we can, right? It's like a 12-year-old movie.
I mean, yeah.
One of the things I really hated about it, and even when I first watched it, and I doubled down on this on my, you know, every time I watch it, like I hate it even more, is you make a point on saving this family, and then towards the end you just kill them all in a helicopter. I'm like, what the hell was the point of that? Like, why? You go through hell to save, you know, the kids, the girl, you know, Michael Pena, and, you know, that's part of your objective is there's a family stuck in a police station. Go rescue them. You rescue them. Michael Pena saves you. He dies. you give this awesome speech that we talked about, for the kid, for the military purposes, and then all of a sudden towards the end, when do you think they get rescued, and you're like, oh, fine, they finally got rescued, here comes an alien drone and just shoots them down. I'm like, what was the entire point of that story right there?
Because it's tough. It's so much cooler when like innocent people get killed in these movies. That kind of adds to the charmlessness for me. Like, you get me actually a little invested in this family, and then, well, that's how you treat them. There you go. I guess I was an asshole for starting to care.
Right. I mean, I give it a little bit of kudos for like actually killing the children, because you don't see a lot of children deaths, but it still just didn't make sense to me. Like, just let them right off. Like, you didn't need to kill them. They jumped like the middle, Aaron Eckhart jumped off the plane or off the helicopter. Michelle Rodriguez, like, they all followed him. He got his crew, his leader. He got the team going strong. You didn't have to kill the family. You didn't have to shoot the helicopter off. Like, you just let them ride into safety.
Well, and it ruins the emotional weight that they put on the fact that, like, what's the last thing that we hear Michael Pena say on camera? It's, please promise me you'll protect my son. And he did. I mean, it just removes the emotional weight from it. It deflates you at a point where you're supposed to be behind these heroes, right? He didn't fulfill his promise. He got selfish. He wanted to go in there and do it alone when he knew that he was being taken to a place where he would have backup, and it got people killed. He did it again, and it didn't play into the end of the movie at all, which, again, I love the end of the movie. Don't get me wrong, but you just took all the emotional weight out of something that literally had me almost in tears about 20 minutes ago in the movie. And now I'm just like, oh, what the fuck is that?
Right. Now he gets civilians killed. And it's just like, come on, man. Like, let's.
But he doesn't care about that because they're not Marines. Semper Fi does. I mean, like, come on. But I'm with you. It's something that bothered me. I didn't, I guess, bother me as much because I think there's a lot of other things. Like you said, there's so many aspects about this movie that make it a popcorn film. So I tried to take moments like that and just put them to the side. But honestly, like, I think for me, we've covered all of my bad so far. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Tice. What else you got for us? You got anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, saving stuff for the ugly. I don't want to start repeating things. I think if I were making this movie, I would have made it, and I think it should be, a more intimate, small scale kind of siege movie. Like, you have these band of heroes facing off against all of these foes. I was thinking of Assault on Precinct 13, the John Carpenter movie. And there have been other movies like that where, like, it's very concentrated, and there you really do get a feeling that you are, I don't know, that you're in this situation with these characters. They're forced to be together. They're forced to have these moments together. Like, this movie, even though they set up some conflict, like, these characters do not have a lot of conflict throughout the film. It's like just people shouting orders and being like, yes, Sarge. And again, yes, there is that one scene that we all talked about, and that's one scene in a 2-hour movie. So I think this movie was just missing a lot of dynamic interactions between characters. And I think that's because they were trying to make both an epic and some sort of gritty street level action movie,
Right.
So I think it all goes back to the director and his attempt to do too much or too many things that just don't go together, not in the fashion that he assembled them. So yeah, at the end of the day, that really is just my big negative. Like, he was just trying to do so many things, and it all felt thrown together to me.
Right. No, and to piggyback a little bit off what you said, is if it would have been a little bit more personal, it's sort of like the director tried to do, and I forget if I think it came out after, but like an End of Watch, like David Ayers' End of Watch.
Yeah, also Michael Pena. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it was, like you said, you get personal. It's an epic. End of Watch is sort of like an epicness where you have, Mexican cartels, but then you get the personal with the two cops, with Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena. And it sort of seemed like this movie would have benefited that you could start off small and build up to the grand scale. Like you guys have all said, is give me a little bit more than just, hey, I'm getting married, or give me more of like, oh, this guy has PTSD. He just saw the psychiatrist one time. Michelle Rodriguez pops in, 20 minutes, into the movie, and we don't know anything about her, just that she's Air Force. Like if you would have started on a small scale and worked your way out, this movie would have worked so much better.
Yeah. Now we do know something about Michelle Rodriguez. She has a brother that doesn't smile. And
yeah, that's a good point. And well, I want to give it a little bit more credit than that, because I think there are a few scenes where they sprinkle it on, but it's not enough. It's not enough to carry it. Like there's that scene where where Neo is freaking out, and they're like, hey, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna make it out, you're gonna marry whatever her name is. I didn't even remember her name. I feel terrible about that, but they did not give us a reason to. And you're gonna marry her and you're gonna be happy and everything's gonna be fine. And I like that little moment. And then when they planted the seeds for that confrontation, once the man in charge sacrifices himself, they no longer trust this guy because they already think that he let his team die before. And I think just that small bit of dialogue, even though it wasn't really well written, where he's just like, man, this is the guy who's leading us. Yeah, it is. But with that, I completely agree. And one movie that I really want to highlight that did this much better, exactly what you described there, was Black Hawk Down. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. It's still a movie that I go back and watch today, despite how tough it is, I think, emotionally, when you have people in your life that were military or are military. It's a movie that is very gritty, and there's a lot to it, but you feel like you're right there with them, and you feel the anxiety, and there are parts where it takes you out of that, but it does so to enhance the story moving forward. And I think when it takes you out of the story that they're trying to tell in this one, it doesn't do it well enough, so that once they get back into it, you're hooked again. They really have to do something interesting, like that ending siege or like the battle on the bridge, to get you invested again, to really just like want to pay attention to the movie, not pick up your phone, not do other things. And obviously 2011 didn't have as many smartphones and crazy technology to distract you, but you got to give your audience less credit than you're giving them. Not everybody's going to love what you've done so far, and you have to keep us engaged. And that would have been a great way to engage. I completely agree with you. Not that bad, Gabe, about what you said there, about it would have really benefited this movie. And I think keeping it grand in the city would be something that's really good, but keep us pushed on those characters, keep those characters together, create some conflict, create some real dialogue that's going to build us, build our emotional investment in these characters, and make it feel like we're there with them.
Yeah. Like, I hate to bring this one up again, but like Independence Day, right? It builds up the alien invasion, right? And we get invested in Will Smith, his kid, his wife. He wants to marry her. We get, Randy Quaid's family. We get invested in that family. We get invested in Randy Quaid and his goofiness, whatever he does. We get invested in Jeff Goldblum and his path. The president. Like, we get invested in all these characters because they're building them out slowly. Yeah, I think Independence is like a half hour longer than what Battle LA is, but it's only because, like we said, you're invested in that early, that when you get into the action, you already are invested in those characters. And that's what is missing in this.
Yeah, it feels shorter.
Yeah,
because that's a real ensemble movie. Like, those characters all have weight and they have different perspectives. Will Smith is the cocky Air Force guy. He gets into the dogfight with the alien and he says, welcome to Earth. That's his job. And then Jeff Goldblum is kind of nerdy, bookish, socially awkward, but lovably quirky, kind of like scientist sort of type who's uncovering all of this. Like, they all bring different things to the table. And Aaron Eckhart, I hope he saw a chiropractor after this, because he carried the movie on his back.
That's the one that we get the most invested, right from the beginning. He's running on the beach. We get it. He's old. He's tired. He talks to the other older, military guy, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if, I can't keep up with these young guys. He's retiring. everybody else gets like a little snippet, right? That guy that plays Mickey in Shameless, you see him at a beer party, right? And at a party, and he's like, oh, he's a virgin, whatever. But not enough for me to get emotionally invested in Mickey. I was like, oh, hey, it's Mickey from Shameless. I forgot he was in this. And I was like, oh, it's home dude from True Blood. I forgot he was, like, you forget them. They're very forgettable characters. So upon rewatch, you're like, oh yeah, this is where I've seen them from before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good cast of characters would have gone a great way. And we just really have one who stands out, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is sad, because I think it's a decent cast from what we saw in their performances, especially considering the dialogue that they were given through a lot of the movie. They really do shine with what they're given, which makes it all the more upsetting that we're not as invested in them.
Right. But you think of like another one is Aliens. That's another cast of Marines. I mean, that's like the gold standard. Not a fair comparison, but
yeah. Very different type of film, but
yeah, just juxtaposed though. Like the chemistry those characters all share, and we don't know anything about them. And for some reason, we care way more than the guy who's going to get married, or the guy who's a virgin, or like all the other weird shit they bring up to try to make us care. Right. Yeah. So it's about personalities too. It's not just about like, I don't know, like personal details.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Since I'm out of things to say in this section, I can't really weigh in unless I have something to bounce off of. I'm wondering if either of you two have anything else you'd like to highlight here. And I'll start with you, Mr. Tice, because I know that you had a lot that you wanted to say that was bad. I'm wondering if you covered everything, or if you got some more that you wanted to bring up.
I think this section has gone on long enough already.
We've just been beating the shit out of this so far.
And listen, if you watch our show, that's usually what I do. I just go off on tangents and just like extend sections.
And that's the fun part. That's the fun part for sure. But we're gonna have plenty to say in the ugly. So I'm gonna just say I've said my big overarching thesis about what I don't like about the movie. And I'm happy to leave it at that.
Okay. And Mr. Tornero, on your end, anything else you wanted to highlight before we would move on?
No, I'm excited to hear what your guys' ugly is going to be on this. So yeah, I'm good.
Well, we're ready to get into that in a moment, because ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the part of the show where you go and you get your popcorn, you get your drinks. But if you really want to have some fun, you're going to take your laptop, you're going to take your tablet, you're going to take your iPhone, you're going to take your Zoom player with you, because you're going to want to listen to the Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed at my favorite part of the show and my lungs' least favorite part of the show. It is the intermission. Now, in the interest of time, I will not be using today's intermission segment to connect back to every single movie that we've covered on the show so far, because truthfully, I don't think my lungs would survive, and I love doing the show and I want to continue doing it, but I do have some great facts to share with you today, and I will be connecting back to the last episode that we did of this podcast. So I'm really excited to get into these, starting off with the first useless fact and a nice short snippet for you here. Director Jonathan Liebsman, I think that's how it's pronounced, right? Liebsman? Whatever. I'm gonna go with it. Jonathan Liebsman's best film, according to the people of Letterboxd, is the 2006 prequel of a remake, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. Has the highest rating of any of his films on Letterboxd. That is a full-length feature film, which is interesting. I never would have expected that, but there it was. I think it sits at about a 2.6 or 2.8 as his highest rated film on Letterboxd that he's directed. Now, again, due to time constraints, not going to connect to every one of them, but getting into the connections, that same director, Jonathan Liebsman, would go on to direct 2014's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which featured Friday the 13th remake star Derek Mears. Derek also appeared in Hatchet 3 with our Lord and Savior, Danielle Harris, as well as 2010's Predator. Now, I know what everybody's thinking here. It'd be really easy for me to say, oh, well, Predators, it's in the same franchise as Alien versus Predator, but fuck you, fuck that. That's too easy. I'm not doing that. So let's fucking go. Predators features Walton Goggins, who appears in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, which itself features two characters played by James Raymar, Raiden in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, for those of you who don't know. But that man, James Raymar, also appears in Too Fast, Too Furious with Paul Walker, who stars in the previous entry of that franchise, called The Fast and the Furious, with Michelle Rodriguez from this very movie that we are watching right now, Battle Los Angeles, but also Paul W.S. Anderson's Resident Evil. What else did Paul W.S. Anderson direct, I hear you ask, from your place of residence at the time of listening to this episode? I'll tell you, motherfucker, that dude directed Alien versus Predator, the last film we covered in this very show. So boom, I connected them. I didn't do the easy route. And again, fuck you. Moving on to my final useless fact of the intermission segments. The film is composed by Brian Taylor, who composed some of the 2000s and 2010s most big films, including Avengers Age of Ultron, several Fast and Furious films, and both Now You See Me films. But he also did so for a couple of recent horror favorites, such as Ready or Not and the newest Scream film, which I thought was really interesting because that's a big departure from some of those big action films. That being said, that'll conclude my useless facts of the episode. I'm curious if either of you guys have a comment.
A comment? I'm supposed to add to that?
Yeah, like that was fucking awesome.
Oh, I will say completely out of breath. Need to get on a treadmill sometime soon. But since we got no comments,
Good thing you don't smoke cigarettes, right?
I know, man. I'd be hacking up a lung over here worse than the COVID episode. But truthfully, you know, we've covered our useless facts. You've gotten your popcorn, you've gotten your drink, your cherry Pepsi, your Topo Chico hard seltzer, whatever you're drinking tonight. You've gotten it, and you're ready to continue with the episode. So without further ado, let's transition to the ugly.
I'm excited.
Are y'all ready for this? Okay. So getting into the ugly, I'm not going to raise a ton of points here because truthfully, a lot of what people had to say was based on their personal experience with the movie, which I found really interesting. That I thought I'd have a list of about 20 things that a million people really hated about this. But one of the things that I saw most commonly that I really want to open up first for discussion here is that it's got way too many cliches. The reason I want to open up with that is because I talked about it earlier in saying that I think when a film belongs to a certain subgenre, it's going to contain tropes. Even if it tries as hard as it can not to have those tropes, it's going to have them in there somewhere. For me, it has a lot of the tropes, but it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the film. Don't get me wrong, there are a few laughable parts, but that has to do with another thing that fans of movies really don't like about this movie. Truthfully, the tropes didn't bother me at all. It does not take down from my enjoyment. I think it's about what you build around it, and that's what I judge the film on. Moving first to you, Mr. Tornero, what did you think about the cliches? Do you think it's a valid argument from the audience, and where does it weigh for you?
I think it's a very valid argument that the critics have. There's a lot of cliches, a lot of tropes that you could see. A lot of movies like I mentioned, Independence Day, 2012, The Day After Tomorrow. But I can bypass all that. I can look beyond that because I am a huge fan of just destruction movies, and so as bad as some of them are. Like I said before, as long as the place is annihilated at the end of the movie, I'm basically gonna like it. I mean, again, Michael Bay, right? We bring him up. People shit on the Transformers movies, rightfully so. But at the end of the day, you go to that Transformers movies to see Optimus Prime beat up other robots, or to see Optimus Prime come in on Grimlock and save the fucking day. And so, I like those. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for bad movies, and this one is the one that I could just bypass all of it because I just sit back and enjoy the action and the dumb aliens.
Mr. Tice.
I wish I could have enjoyed the action or the dumb aliens. That's just kind of where I landed with this. Speaking specifically to the cliches, I mean, I went in expecting it. I almost would have been disappointed if we didn't get it. I mean, Aaron Eckhart is literally weeks away from retirement. Yeah. And everything they try to do with these Marines to give them distinctions, like that one guy who dies on the bridge, you know, top of his class. And there's the guy who's getting married. There's the virgin who's always fucking up.
Because he's a fucking virgin.
Whoa, hey, okay,
sorry,
so
joking, everybody.
Every single.
Oh man,
episode.
I didn't even think about that. The only one we had left was the fucking virgins, man. Just offended our last So I'm sorry. We did this with Tony too. Very sorry that you came on the show in the episode that we alienated the rest of our remaining audience.
Damn it, I'm a virgin.
Oh my god! I totally.
All right, guys,
man,
I'll
I'm
see you
offending
later.
Our guests now, man. I'm offending our guests. This is ridiculous, man. I gotta watch my mouth.
You didn't even do a background check, Connor. Jesus Christ!
I should have done my research.
We're gonna send.
I wouldn't have passed the background check, so don't worry. It's okay.
We don't have many qualifications. You just can't be a virgin.
So, gosh, yeah, cliches abound. They're funny. I wish they'd leaned into the cliches more. The cliches are just there, like hanging there like Christmas ornaments. And I wanted more. I wanted the trashiest, sleaziest B movie you could have given me. So the cliches really did not offend me at all. I thought they were funny.
Yeah. And I will say too, like to highlight this a little bit, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about the rating that this movie's given. But you know, we've highlighted our first point of ugly here. And I think the thing that we have to really bring up is that this movie really didn't get a great response from the audience. Right away, it was not liked, and it's not been a movie that time has been kind to. You know, we see films come out that are panned at the time that they're released, or even bomb at the box office, that do something great when they get on DVD release and they blow up and explode. I'm talking movies like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, obviously a very different movie, but one that has transcended its status, you know, at the time that it came out. But this movie's not beloved, and I want to get into a few reviews that I was able to find on Letterboxd that I really enjoyed for this one, and of course give credit to the artists that I will call them. Of course, these are all negative reviews. I just happened to dig what they had to say, whether I agreed with it or not. Bringing up first the user Ethan from Letterboxd, who gave this film a 0.5 star, stating everything about it is shit. I've seen porn with better cinematography and acting. We've talked about our thoughts on the acting, but I just thought that was a very funny one. Obviously, Ethan, very well versed in the world of pornography, especially those with very high levels of cinematography. Someone who also, I think, probably has a lot of experience with that subgenre of pornography is the next gentleman that I'll be reading the review from. Trashing this guy for no reason. I actually really like his name. This gentleman's name is Tentin Quarantino. He gave this film 2 stars and gave us a list of alternate titles that he came up with while watching the film. I'll read them out to you as follows. Lesson, How Not to Write Dialogue. Aaron Eckhart, Commanding Anonymous Morons. Cliche, the movie. Exposition, it's everywhere. Michelle Rodriguez, best thing about this movie. Second act, better than the first. ADHD, the editor. Michael Pena, can't save this. Reminder of everything that is happening every 10 seconds via dialogue. Call of Duty is more fulfilling. Moments, some aren't bad. Third act, better than the first 2. Guilty pleasure, possibly. And terrible movie, definitely. All of those, of course, stylized as the Battle Los Angeles is with the colon in there.
Yeah.
But I do have 2 more reviews that I want to cover. One of which I just want to cover the first part of. It's Oscar, who gave the film 1 star. If Arrival was written and directed by a 4th grader, is how he started his review. I really want to see Arrival directed by a 4th grader now that I've read that. But the final review is from our man Roman Kirby, who's a patron on Letterboxd. He gave the film 1 stars, and I don't know why this made me laugh so much, but he put, if you love Los Angeles so much, then why don't you marry it? Don't really know where that came from. I think this man might have a hatred for Los Angeles and in turn you, LeGabe. Yeah, I obviously we've seen from these reviews that people are not a fan of this. That leads me into the next point here, which we saw highlighted in one of the points here, and it's the writing and dialogue. People really don't like it about this. And I got some things that I want to say about it, but I'm going to jump to you first, Mr. Tornero, and ask you your thoughts. I know you've alluded to it a little bit throughout the episode, but clearly a big point of contention for people. Where do you land?
Like overall, like my ranking and everything on this?
No, where do you land on like the dialogue?
Oh, on the dialogue.
The writing and the dialogue. Yeah.
I can agree. I'm not watching, and again, I always preface this. I'm not watching a destruction movie for the dialogue, or So I got to say, like, I look past it, just because of the type of. I already know what type of movie I'm going to watch. I already know I'm watching a bad movie. I mean, anything that starts off with Battle LA or Skyline or
Skyline. That's one I want to do for this
Deep
podcast.
Impact. There you go. Deep Impact. Like, come on. I mean, we're not. I already know it's going to be a bad movie. I already know going in, it's a bad movie. I'm not expecting Oscar-worthy dialogue and performances and stuff like that. It's a bad movie. Like, what else do you expect? It's called Battle Los Angeles.
So for you, I think the overarching theme of what you said there is that yes, the movie has terrible dialogue and writing, but it doesn't bother you in the grand scheme of the film.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. Just because it's like I said, what else do you expect from a movie like this?
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at like the cover art on the back of it, you just have like little aliens, and you have Aaron Eckhart, and it's like, so this is what got me at Blockbuster, right? You pick it up. You see a little soldier, you see some little stuff, and then all of a sudden it's just in the back a little, and it's not even a paragraph. It's like 2 sentences giving you the synopsis of the movie in the back. Like, do you want to hear the synopsis? I'll give you the synopsis when you get it. Marine Staff Sergeant Aaron Eckhart and his platoon take on an enemy unlike any they've ever encountered when hostile alien invaders attack the planet in this epic sci-fi action film. That's all you get.
Oh my God. That sort of sounds like, like when a movie would come out in like the 60s, like it was a horror film, there'd always be that voiceover at the beginning that's like Night of the Lepus. That reminds me of what they would say in those type of things. I did not know that was on the back of the Blu-ray. That's amazing.
Yeah, that person who wrote that did not see the movie. Guaranteed.
They didn't. So like I said, so if you pick this up like 2011, 2012, you're a Blockbuster, you're like, all right, am I gonna watch this? You pick this up, you see 3 sentences, you already know it's a bad movie. Like, you already know. Like, are you really expecting like great dialogue on this? No.
And that's fair. And I'm curious, Mr. Tice, is somebody who kind of falls, and again, it's clear where this is going in your final verdict. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who may be a little behind on this, but where do you land on the writing and dialogue for this? It seems like something that was also a point of contention for you.
No, it wasn't. I actually agree with my fellow Gabe here. I'm not going to hold dialogue against a movie called Battle Los Angeles. That's like an easy shot to make. If you don't like the movie, it's easy to make fun of. I actually thought the dialogue was better than I expected, to be quite honest. And maybe that's just because they actually do have a great actor like Aaron Eckhart delivering it, but whatever. Point is, I didn't get up in arms. It's one of those like really lazy critiques, in my opinion, that people like to throw around. Like, unless you're like Star Wars prequel level bad with your dialogue, I'm really not going to be that nitpicky when I watch my alien summer blockbuster movies. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair point to bring up. And it's funny because normally I feel like I fall on the moderate side for some of these, but I actually have this as a con. And the reason that I do is not so much of like, oh, I'm disappointed in a disaster film for having bad dialogue. It wasn't anything about that. I think the biggest problem that I had was that there were moments where the writing and the dialogue in the film were smart. and they did good stuff. There were lines in this film that I actually was like, you know what, wow, okay, this isn't bad. But I think that's why it bothered me so much when the dialogue was so bad, or when the situations that they set up with the writing and the story were so bad, is because there were so many moments where I felt like this movie had the potential to cross it had the potential to cross a lot of lines here, because it doesn't really know what it wants to be throughout the movie. Does it want to be a sci-fi epic? Does it want to be a military movie? Does it want to be a super cliche, just generic action film? Does it want to be a buddy movie? Does it want to be a conflict movie? It doesn't really know what it wants to be. And all of them sort of meet in this intersection where the movie could have crossed into over any of the borders into one of those categories. So it was really disappointing where they tried to sort of cross into all of them. And then in that, they introduce moments that don't work at all. Like that scene that seems so small, but when she talks about being a veterinarian, it makes no sense. There's situations with the aliens that make no sense. There's dialogue in scenes that really could be heavy, emotional, or built up scenes that the situation was not kind to what ended up happening. And the dialogue around it made you either laugh or just took you completely out of it. So I'm with you guys on the point that it doesn't detract from the movie as much for me, but I come away from it as something that I do dock some points for, because there were moments that it did shine through. And it makes me sad for the writer, because as a writer myself, dialogue's not easy. And I've sold scripts where I've had to change the dialogue a million times because it's not an easy thing to write. But at the same token, you have to take the time to make sure that it matches. You know, your writing has to match, the tone of your writing has to match the dialogue that you set up, and your dialogue has to remain consistent throughout the movie. It's not to say you can't have a bad line in a great movie. I mean, find me a Quentin Tarantino movie that doesn't have egregious use of the N-word for no reason. You can't. And that's a dark spot for me in his scripts. And for me, there's a lot of dark spots in the script, but some bright ones that really could have brought it to that next level, and that disappoints me. So it's more of a disappointment than it is like a fucking, I hate this writer. But I have to bring it up as something that I do agree with the criticism a little bit.
Let me put it this way. This movie has way bigger problems than dialogue.
Oh, and those are things we'll be getting into. And
yeah.
I don't want to harp on the dialogue too much. That's just my personal opinion on it here. But Mr. Tice, I know that you also looked through some of these highly contested points of this movie, and I'm curious if you want to bring one up for I'm gonna just say Red Gabe, because you're wearing a red shirt now. I'll say Red Gabe can respond to here. What else? What do you got so far?
The big one I saw was the camera work. The camera work. This was in this era where action movies were using shaky cam, and they were going for a very certain kind of effect. It was the Jason Bourne effect. Like, let's make it feel gritty. Let's make it feel mature and adult. You know, this ain't your dad's sci-fi alien movie, because those were fun. No, this is like a hardcore. Like, again, I mean, I keep saying the word gritty because that's really the word that comes to mind, but it's incredibly dated. It makes the action feel incoherent, and I dare say it just makes the movie look cheap and immature. Like, there are a couple shots where it looks like they set the exposure of the camera with the shutter speed, meaning that it's going to look at it's going to look like things are moving really weird in the camera, like the frame rate is off. That's something that action movies continue to do today, and I don't understand why. It's like one of the most egregious sins an action movie can make, in my opinion, because when I want to look away from the screen, that's hard, right? I mean, what's the most important part about watching a movie? Being able to watch it. So I agree with the criticisms that people made. And I think it's something that kind of sinks the movie in a lot of ways. So I don't know, fellow Gabe, do you have, well, what's your take on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think I've said it. It's one of the things that's hard to sit through is how much camera movement it has. if it was more, stabilized or just your normal whatever, however they shot the scene without that shaky camera area, I think it would have worked a lot better. I feel like sometimes they're like pointing the camera somewhere and then there's like action. I feel like I'm missing action sometimes within this movie. Like I feel like what I'm watching is not really what's going on like behind the scenes or whatever. I feel like I missed an explosion, I missed an alien, because I feel like it's not, the camera work isn't coherent enough, for me to be like, I don't feel like I'm watching an entire movie. Like if I was seeing it on the big screen back in 2011, I would have thought I'm missing something. When I see it and on my TV, I feel like I'm missing something because of the camera work. Like you said, I don't think that works well at all for this movie.
Yeah, and you actually touched on something else. It's not just the lighting or whatever. The shots they choose to use, they hardly use a single wide shot in this whole movie. And this is a destruction movie. You're supposed to admire the effects. You're supposed to be astonished by the visuals. And I highlighted a few examples that are outliers of shots that do work to serve that purpose. But most of the movie, man, it's just faces. It's Aaron Eckhart's face. It's Michelle Rodriguez's face. It's Michael Pena's face. Like there's almost no wide shots or establishing shots, and that adds to the lack of cohesion when you get into these big action scenes. I hardly know where anybody is throughout these big set pieces.
Right. One of the awesome, I mean, it could have been an awesome scene is the freeway scene, right? Is they're in action against the alien. They're advancing, they're retreating, whatever. And I feel like at that point they should have given us a widescreen, the aftermath of that destruction of the freeway. But like you said, it's sort of like a close up. You see a couple cars burned. You see the bus burned, and then they give us a close up of them, escaping the freeway. Like, they should have given us that widescreen, because I'm pretty sure the entire freeway is destroyed, and so we could see that aftermath of them destroying. Like, give me a sense of dread with these aliens. And then, like you said earlier, you don't get that sense. Like I feel like we could beat them up with like freaking shovels and stuff like that. Like I don't get a sense of like, oh my god, these aliens are badass. It's more like, they're sort of weak in a sense, right? Take them out of water and you're good to go.
Yeah, the camera doesn't do any favors to anything they try to do in this. And that's something that I'm really disappointed by, because to be completely honest, I almost got sick several times watching this. I'm somebody who's very much affected by motion sickness, and I'm not being dramatic when I tell you there were a few times where I physically had to look away from the camera, or I'm sorry, from the screen rather, or else I was going to get sick. And I want to weigh it higher, and I do agree with the criticisms. But the one thing that I will say is this, and this is actually a point, I guess, towards films like this. First of all, it puts them in a time capsule. So if you're a big fan of films that came out around this time, this is easily identifiable as something that came out around this era of action films. But I also think that we're kind of spoiled by films today that have learned from the mistakes of the shaky cam era of action films. I mean, let's compare fight scenes between, the Bourne films and John Wick, where the camera is very much stationary, or if it's not stationary, it's following the action. It puts you in to what's happening, and it's not trying to avoid the shortcomings of the film. It's accentuating what the film does well. And this movie, it feels like they were hiding things. It feels like a tactic that's not like, oh, we're going to be cool and edgy and we're going to follow this lead. It feels like, okay, well, a lot of movies right now are doing shaky cam, which is good because we don't have the budget to do all the things we want to do in this. And if you're going to make a disaster movie like this, you got to put the effort into the disaster, and they didn't do that enough. And the camera work feels like a tactic to hide a lot of that. But what it does is it hurts what we're seeing, because this is supposed to be the most interesting part of the movie. You've already given us characters, which we'll get into in a few moments here. You've already given us characters that we don't really relate to or that we think are boring. You've already given us some dialogue that we can't follow. This is where you need to deliver. You need to pack a punch. And there are areas where they do. Do not get me wrong. There are some really cool action scenes in this. There are some where the camera doesn't completely take away from what you're seeing, but most of them, it diminishes what we're seeing on screen, and it hurts the movie a lot. And I agree with the criticism I have a few points for it, like I mentioned, but all in all, they dropped the ball.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of Alien versus Predator Requiem, which had the problem of being unwatchable, literally, probably to hide some subpar effects and things like that. Like I alluded to this, but this movie feels cheap to me. Like I was surprised to see the budget was 70 million. Like, you know how much you can do with $70 million?
Oh my God. Where did it all go? And you know what? And I want to say this, and people are going to laugh at this. And this might be something that I cover on the show in the way future. I mean, this is when we're not worried about episodes gaining traction. But if you want to watch a movie around this time that utilized their budget better, that shot the film better, even though 2009 and 2011 are a decent gap, utilized shaky cam better, did a lot better things with a much smaller budget. Check out the surprisingly good Universal Soldier Regeneration movie. It stars the same guys that we saw in the old Universal Soldier films. It's got Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, but it brings in UFC fighter Andre the Pitbull Arlovsky, one of my favorite UFC fighters. And it does an awesome job of using its budget to its advantage. It knows it's not going to go crazy. So what it does is it contains it within an area in which they can utilize that budget. It can show off everything that you're supposed to see. They can destroy things. They can show the destruction. And when they use the shaky cam, it's using it to the advantage of what we're seeing, and it's not using it to hide things that you shouldn't be seeing. And that's what this film feels like. Not to harp on it too much. I'm curious if you have anything else to say about it, Gabe, on the bottom of my screen.
I mean, I think you guys just hit it on the head with all of it. I mean, yeah, the budget was, like you said, it was so big for us to get something that feels like not even like a B movie. I would say like maybe like a C type movie. It's just they could have just gotten so much better effects out of it, camera work. I think most of that money went to giving it to Aaron Eckhart, Michelle Rodriguez,
I mean,
Michael Pena.
Are they really that expensive? Like with 70 million, I thought, and I'm really grateful they cast Aaron Eckhart, but he's not the
$50 million man. I can tell you that. I mean,
it's not like
this movie feels like it was made with like a 15, 20, even like $25 million budget. It doesn't feel like a $70 million.
Yeah.
movie.
So I hope that 70 million includes marketing costs, because I know that the marketing campaign was pretty big on this.
Huge.
And
I have to say too, like, I just want to bring this up as a quick point. Something that I saw in a lot of reviews, and I didn't put this in here, but so many people said some variation of the phrase, watch the trailer instead of the movie because the trailer's better. And I want to say, like, I think it's funny how I watched the trailer and it resonated with me so much that, I mean, 11 years after this film came out, I can still remember that trailer beat for beat. And it's interesting.
Do you feel like you got a bait and switch from the trailer to it?
I don't know that I could call it a bait and switch personally, but I can tell you this. It's one of those movies that when you watch the trailer, you feel like you're going to get something bigger than you get when you watch it. So in a way, it is a bait and switch, but I don't know that I walked away as disappointed as some of the other people would have. If I spent money to go see this in the theaters and I couldn't pull it up on Netflix, I probably would have been a little upset. But since I couldn't, I don't have a frame of reference for that. I'm curious if you have any opinions on that.
Who, me?
Yeah.
You know what? I really don't. I think that, as far as the movie is concerned, I went out and bought it so I could have it, right? And I think I paid $5 at a used DVD store, and I think it's a good investment for it. Like, people are gonna have so many problems with the movie, like we've talked about, and I think sometimes, and I hate to beat a dead horse with it, I just think sometimes people just expect too much out of movies like these.
I agree with that.
But you know what? I've also seen the higher end, like for example, Pacific Rim, right? Pacific Rim is another disaster movie. And I know their budget was, double than what this one is, but you do see that one and can't speak tonight, in all its glory. with Pacific Rim. I think that as far as the budget with this, they could have just done so much more. It's either give me a good dialogue or give me good CGI effects. And the movie tried to do so much, and it failed at everything. And I know it sounds like I like I like it, but I do see I do see every criticism. I'm not blind to the criticism that this movie gets. And I see everybody's point. I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, I get that. At the end of the day, I just suspend disbelief and be like, I enjoy it. I could eat some popcorn, pop it in at 6 a.m, eat an ice cream bar. My cherry Pepsi is always with me at 6 a.m, and just have fun with it.
Mr. Tice, what else you got?
Oh, yeah. In terms of what
I'm sorry, that was really fun.
Because we've touched on a lot. For me, the big one I saw, and this is what I knew about the movie going into it, is that the shaky cam was really out of control.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was a found footage movie for a long time. For some reason,
that way.
Yeah. Which is like it reminded me of Cloverfield at a few points.
Dude, and it gives really big Cloverfield vibes, especially in the trailer, which is why I could say like Bait and Switch might be a little bit of a.
And it was coming out at a point when found footage was really popular. So I don't know if that influenced the direction or the marketing,
right.
But it clearly had an effect. I almost wish it was a found footage movie because I mean, I don't know, like let's really commit to the bit, right? Yeah, I mean, people complain that the characters are flat. True. In my opinion.
Well, I think that's one we could dive into for sure about the characters. But I saw that.
Well, I think we've all touched on that, right? I mean, what's there to add?
Yeah, point? I mean, I think we can. I mean, are we all in agreement that that's a fair criticism? I mean, the characters are at the very least boring, but I saw a lot of people saying unlikable. I wouldn't go as far as to say unlikable. I liked everybody in the film, but I didn't connect with them as much as I think they were trying for.
You don't really care for any of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the parts that you do care about is like, it feels like almost like a throwaway character. You know what I mean? Like Michael Pena's character isn't a throwaway character in the scheme of the movie, but that's what he kind of feels like he's introduced as.
Right.
So yeah, very weird. I would say boring is fair, but I wouldn't say unlikable.
Not unlikable, just really lacking in the character department. Yeah, that the action was shot very incoherently. I agree with that. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, or maybe you want to contest that. But really, except maybe for the climax when they're trying to take down that mothership, I totally agree with the criticism.
That mothership takedown also didn't make sense at all for me.
It's like they're pointing a laser at it that'll guide them.
Like I get the laser. I think that I've seen it used in the military to paint stuff with it. I think is what they call it. Mm-hmm. But only one laser or one missile was able to bring it down.
They're weak aliens.
Right. Also, if you're a mothership and you're controlling everything, why can't you move on your own? Why do you need this 4 small ass drones to whisk you away, very, very slowly?
That was the really interesting part that I don't get why they put in, is that it's just a small line of dialogue, but they say the drones are moving it away. But why? Why do the drones have to move it at all? Isn't it controlling the drones?
Right. Isn't it stationary? Again, I hate to bring it up. Independence Day, right? You have the mothership. It's in outer space. It's controlling everything, but the spaceships that are in the stratosphere, they're individually powered in a sense, and they have their own shields. But the mothership, the mothership out in space is still controlling everything, but it's able to move on its own.
Yes.
It's one part of the entire ecosystem.
Yes.
And I see what they try to do with them, because every drone, the spaceships were made out of individual drones that could break away to their own. But if they're able to do that, then why is this mothership not able to do anything like that? And then it needs to be whisked away by 4 drones.
Nothing about how the aliens worked in this made any sense to me. And it was sad that every time they tried to explain something interesting about these aliens, they just ended up making them look ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, like they try to fill out the world a little more. Not very much, but the few times they do, it's shit like they're here for our water and they have a mothership that cannot fly or can't move around. I guess it can levitate but not move in a particular direction.
Right, like you saw, like District 9.
Yeah, like the District 9 thing. I do see an interesting comment here. I don't know how common this is. I mean, for our foreign viewers, I guess this will be an interesting thing to talk about. Somebody said this movie is too American for my taste.
I saw that a lot. It was a huge it wasn't a huge criticism when the film came out, but in recent years, especially the more recent reviews that I read, I went through a lot, and in about half of them, that was a complaint that they had.
Yeah,
it's too patriotic. It's propaganda, all that stuff.
And I alluded to that, and so I agree, and I imagine it must feel even more obnoxious if you're a foreigner who has to subject yourself to this level of propaganda.
But I will say this though, right? It made more money internationally. I mean, this movie made 211. Wait, hold on. 211 million. So like it made its money and it's in the red. It made 83 million domestically, but it made 128 worldwide.
I don't think that's what they were expecting.
So
yeah. I think they were expecting something above 500 million.
Well, you know what? It's interesting though. Like I have to say, well, definitely they were expecting a lot more people to care about it in the United States. I think that's very clear. But the one thing that I will say is like, I think one thing, first of all, this did not bother me. I am a relatively patriotic guy. I can definitely see the faults in our country. We're not going to talk politics, but I like to consider myself a patriotic guy. I like to consider myself, it doesn't bother me when it's in movies. I watched a movie from China called Wolf Warrior, featuring Scott Adkins, who's a fun like B-movie martial arts guy. Love him. He's been in some big stuff too. But it's heavy in the Chinese military propaganda, and like throw it in your movie. I don't care. It's not going to hurt my enjoyment. In this case, it actually kind of helped it because I think that moment where he's like, Marines don't quit, I thought was like one of the cool parts of the movie. But I actually am going to disagree with you about what you said about foreign audiences, because foreign audiences actually for a while expected that out of American films, and they actually will get behind American films more when they are so patriotic. And in countries like England, where they have like this sort of negative feeling about the United States in general, it doesn't really do well. But places like Japan, like, from what I understand from reading about how films perform in the box office, ones that are about the American military or about the strength of America or have those undertones do very well in countries like that. In some cases, yes, but in other cases, no. And I think that's why it made so much money. And it's a point that a lot of people have, but I actually kind of liked it about it. I gotta say.
I like you said, I don't want to get into politics, but I don't mind a strong patriotic, movie, what have you, because at the end of the day, I mean, my parents are immigrants, right? But at the end of the day, I have to, I'm proud that I was able to be born here, and and so I am proud of the country. I'm proud of the opportunities they gave my parents, proud of the opportunities they gave myself. So yeah, I would say, I'm patriotic to a fault. Obviously, no country is perfect, or else, we wouldn't be, immigrants from all over the world. And so, but I don't mind patriotism in my movies. Like you said, I could watch, Korean movie and you could see the patriotism in that, or a movie from Mexico and I see the patriotism in that. It's just, every country is going to have their own patriotic movie. And when you see a movie about military, you got to expect it's going to be American patriotism in it,
But I do see Mr. Tice's point here. I really feel like I'm in a business meeting. I do see Mr. Tice's point here, however, because, and I will say too, there are moments where it does feel like there could have been like a cutaway to the few, the proud, the Marines.
It felt pandering to me.
There were a few parts where it did feel like it did pander. It felt
like
like
the ending, it felt like pandering.
Now, see, that's where I feel like
I
it
know
did a
we
good job
disagree.
pandering.
I-
Yes, I feel like that was a
good job
good
pandering.
pandering. But you know, like in wrestling terms, they went for the cheap pop and it didn't work. You know, normally when you go for the cheap pop, the audience goes, yeah, but in this case, the audience was like, no.
Also, I think I'm just starting to realize a big problem I have with the movie. And if you want to make a patriotic movie, that's fine. I mean, I saw the Top Gun sequel. That was all right.
Huh, yeah.
That was fine. You know, I can think of a few. I'm not like if you work it into the movie, into the themes and characters, that's one thing. But this movie wasn't even patriotic so much as it was just pro-military. Like when you think of America, when you think like the citizens of this country, this movie is not interested in those people. In fact, they kind of give the middle finger to them with that, with the way they dispatch of Michael Pena and his family, to me. And it really elevates these Marines. Like these are the cool guys. These are the tough guys. These are the people who are going to protect us, you know.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm not saying I need the military demonized. It just felt very one-dimensional in that way. And I think that's why it comes across so pandering to me.
Well, and to that point, that does work against it, because then the whole point of introducing people like that, if you're going to make a patriotic film, is that they get saved in the end, right? And you know, in a movie like this, like I feel like it would have been more effective to give a patriotic message if you didn't introduce those characters, or if you did, they weren't so central. Like you didn't spend so much time with them, you know, because you spend time connecting with Michael Pena's character, and that's why his death hits harder than anybody else's death that happens in the movie. But to just dispatch of it, no, I definitely see what you're saying about that. That side of it, I think, is too far, where you're just sort of like, it goes back to the movie not really knowing what it wants to be. Does it want to be a movie that's like, you know, Semper Fi, you know, we're the military, we're strong and we protect our citizens? Or does it want to be the action movie that gives you the surprise kill of important characters that you're introduced to? It doesn't know what it wants to be there. And it does set up a contradictory message. You know, I think the Patriot side of it, I did enjoy, but I didn't even think about it until you brought it up. But that's a good point, to where like, it was almost just like the only people who care, they're the only people who matter are military, which is funny because they actually allude to it in a line where he's like, he promises to get the kid out of there. And then he goes, what about us? Are you going to get us out of here? Do we matter? And it's like, yeah, you matter a little too much, actually. So that's just, I see what you're saying there. And that was actually a criticism I saw pretty commonly. I guess I just kind of needed to put in better terms, but that could have easily been something I put here, because it's what a lot of people said.
Yeah. Now, were there any other big consistent criticisms that we need to tackle? I feel like those were the big ones.
Just the bad CGI, but we've covered that.
Yeah, we touched on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that covers everything that I was able to see about it. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to say about any of those points while we were still discussing the ugly?
Just to go back on a little bit of numbers, because you guys say that it usually like a lot of these countries, like even before, they're like the big patriotic stuff. China loved it. It made 25 million in China, which is, you know, quite surprising.
Well, they love the Transformers movies, and those are the same flavor of you know, military might and all that.
Listen, those Transformer movies, military might, they don't get that way until they introduce John Cena and his Marine thing.
No, I remember the first movie, man. I remember the first movie.
It was Sector 7.
Yeah.
It was like an FBIS, but no, I get what you mean. I just, but yeah, I mean, it's like you guys have all said, it's just a movie that just doesn't know what it wants to be. You never know where it's going to go as you're watching it. So.
Yeah, and that can work to the advantage of a film like this, but it can also work to its detriment.
Right.
I think it did it both in certain parts, but more to its detriment, unfortunately, in some areas. With that, since we are wrapping up our ugly section, now is the part where we get into the final verdict. For some people in the episode, it might be something that you've been waiting for. For others, it may be something that you already know. So I want to start. with Mr. Tornero down there, if you could give us your sort of final verdict on the film, if you want to make any closing remarks before you give it your final rating, whether and for those of you who haven't watched the show before, if you're coming over from Flopbuster or just discovering us for the first time, we rank our films at the end on a 4 set scale. It is the movie. It's either that bad, it's not that bad, actually good, or actually great. This is something that I think will be really interesting to see where you land on, and take it away.
So I'm gonna say this movie is not that bad. This movie to me is one of those movies that it's a summer blockbuster, especially back in the days where they would just put anything during the summer and see if it hits. And this is that type of movie where you just have to go in, and like I've said, almost the entire show is just suspend disbelief. Just watch them fight some corny ass aliens, watch them kill a family that they didn't need to kill, and then just have some fun with it. Get some popcorn, get some cherry Pepsi, maybe some Reese's Pieces, and just enjoy the movie. Overall, there's a lot of stuff that's like we've talked about that's really bad with it. But I think the good outweighs that bad, and it just makes it just not that bad of a movie.
Yeah, and by the way, gotta respect your undying loyalty to the cherry Pepsi, bringing it up in that final closing remarks there. Love it. Love to see it. Love some Pepsi love. And moving forward, Mr. Tice, you're somebody who I think we kind of know what side you land on, but I'm interested to hear what your final comments will be about the film.
I think it's really great. No, I think it's
that would be the biggest curveball I have ever seen.
I kind of want to do that because you keep saying all this, that where I'm going to land, and I get that I showed my hand, but I can't in good conscience say that it's anything more than that bad. It has a 2.3 on Letterboxd. I can't imagine giving it a higher score. I want to say that I respect how there is a certain either so bad it's good or B movie quality to it. So I can appreciate how somebody can enjoy it from that perspective. To me, the action is too incoherent, and the script is too humorless and self-serious for me to kind of get in that headspace and enjoy it on that level. For me, it was a rough watch. I don't know if another rewatch would kind of make something click, and I could finally get into it. Mad respect for Aaron Eckhart, and this movie had at least 2 really solid scenes that I'm gonna think about, and I give this movie a star for each of those scenes, making it 2 stars. So I think people are right on the money. I think it's a 2.3. It's that bad.
Okay. I'll be honest, getting into my final thoughts, this is an interesting movie. And this was very hard for me to finally make a decision on what I wanted to say. On one hand, I feel it's a lazily written, trope-filled CGI fest with boring characters. I agree with a lot of that stuff. But that being said, it's also like a patriotic triumph story, and there's a lot of there were certain moments in the film that genuinely had me feeling, which I didn't expect from a movie like this. So taking both of those sides of things, considering the good, the bad, the ugly, semper fucking fi, this movie's not that bad. I gotta say it's not that bad. I wanted to land on it is that bad because there were a lot of moments where I was really, really disappointed, or I really wanted it to reach its full potential, and it never got there. But at the end of the day, I think this is exactly what Mr. Tornero from Flopbuster here has been relaying to us throughout the entire episode. And I think it's really the theme of this episode. And it's that if you're one of those people who can watch a movie and just flip your brain off for a little bit, let's watch the destruction, let's watch the madness. Is it all done perfectly? Is it all done well? No. But for the things that are done well, if you've heard the points that we've made so far and you didn't like the film to begin with, or you didn't mind the spoilers and haven't seen it before, check it out. Flip your brain off, grab you a cherry Pepsi, grab you some popcorn, and just enjoy the film for what it is. And what it is a summer blockbuster from 2011 that failed to live up to the expectations of the time, but has the potential to live up to your personal expectations, having set them, knowing that this film is considered to be such a terrible film. I hope people give it the chance that it deserves. And I guess if I was to leave it on a final term here, America, fuck yeah.
That just can't be beat.
Wow, that is the first time I've given something a that bad, and Connor has given it a not that bad.
Yeah,
that's a first for us. That's a first.
Oh man, so I was here for a first, huh?
Yes, and that's to say, by the way, that's not the first time that Gabe and I have disagreed. We've actually had 2 times where I have said the movie is that bad, and he has said it's not that bad.
I feel stabbed in the back now, Connor.
Well, and hey, but there was our episode 1 where I thought it was actually great, and you gave it a not that bad. So we've had our disagreements over the show, but that's what the show's all about. I think watching movies like this, you're always going to have divisive opinions, and like you've brought up a few times so far, both of you actually, films are so subjective, and no matter what anybody says, there's no objective opinion on movies. There's objective facts about films, what the film was made for, what it released, what the box office numbers are, and audience score overall are all things that are objective about films. But subjectively, this is what you make it. And I hope everybody tries to make it fun.
Yeah, like if you enjoy this movie, please by all means continue to enjoy it. And I wish I did. I mean, nobody wants to really watch a bad movie. I wished I did,
Oh, that's gonna be me with that Knives Out remake when I'm gonna watch that.
The sequel to Knives Out. Yeah, I heard Tony pushing you to watch that, so I know you didn't. I know you fell asleep during the first one.
I fell asleep during the first one, so I'm hoping I'm gonna hate watch that one and then tell Tony it sucks.
Well, hopefully after that, you won't have to watch another bad movie till Tony decides to do another 40s movie review episode of Flopbuster, when he wants to bring up all those old movies that are in black and white.
He says that he's making me more cultured because I've gone out on the limits that I don't watch movies, done before like 1970, which is a lie. I've seen some, but I just like to troll him some,
You guys are a dangerous combination. You guys are trolling each other. It's amazing to see.
But at the end of the day, we all fall sort of on different sides of the fence, even though I do have the same opinion as far as saying it's not that bad. It's hard for me to decide on a final rating, and it's something that I'm going to kind of struggle with when I'm putting it on Letterboxd, because technically at the end of the day, when we say it's not that bad, that just means we're looking at the average score and we say it should be higher. I don't know if this gets a 3. I don't know if this gets a 2.5. I don't know what it gets. I'd probably give it somewhere in between if I could. But honestly, I hope everybody goes out and watches it, enjoy the movie, and most importantly, the biggest thing that I want to take away from this is that our guest today has his own show. We've alluded to it many times. Flopbuster does live streams every Tuesday and Thursday. They release a lot of other content. I know Tony's doing some cool stuff with like video essays on the channel, and you're handling the reins right now over on TikTok, and you have some great Spanish language content as well for those of you who habla español. Anything that you want to say about your show, I'd love to have you plug it to our audience.
No, nothing. Just right now we have on Tuesdays our My Favorite Horror, where we have a lot of YouTubers, famous YouTubers. You guys are included in there, obviously, and we're gonna have you guys we're having everybody on Tuesday to talk about their favorite ones. Next Tuesday we have Cody Leach, and then I think you guys are coming on in 2 or 3 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, I think our episode will come out like right after this episode drops. So we can get into the dates after the episode. Right. But at the time this drops, we will be appearing on the show very soon.
Yeah, and and then just go back on TikTok real quick. I am going to be doing like a whole series on Hispanic movies for Hispanic Heritage Month, where I'll be basically telling, going over 30 Hispanic movies that made an impact in Hollywood. My first one up, I actually got it one right here, is going to be Blood In, Blood Out.
Oh yeah, man.
Hell yeah.
That's going to be the first one I'm going to do on September 15th. So in about a week from now, that'll drop on TikTok.
Everybody
Awesome
go
stuff,
check
man.
out Gabe's TikTok.
Yeah, go check it out. And what's the at for that TikTok?
Oh, at Capital Cookie.
Capital Cookie. Okay, so it's like your Instagram. Okay.
It's like my
Yeah.
Instagram. I ran it through a rap name, emulator to see what they could come up with, and Capital Cookie came up. And I was like, I like it.
I like it. I like it a lot. And of course, the Flopbuster YouTube channel, please search that up. And they have social channels as well on Facebook and Twitter. I don't think you guys have an Instagram, right?
No, we don't. Just our own, whatever. And then Tony has an OnlyFans, so you can check it out.
So yeah, subscribe to Tony's OnlyFans. His lovely girlfriend is not included in any of the posts, so all of you who are big Tony fans will love it. But no, in all seriousness, please go check out Flopbuster. Like we said, at the time that this episode drops, we're getting ready to come on to their show to talk about a movie that Gabe and myself are really excited to cover on the show. We're big fans. I'm not lying when I say that if you go and check out Flopbuster, you'll probably see me every Thursday watching the live show. I'm there on Tuesdays watching my favorite horror movie that you guys are running through at the end of October. And yeah, just please go check out their stuff. And this will probably not be the last time that we collaborate.
Oh, definitely
because
not.
I hope not.
We've had a great time so far. Want to say again, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys.
It's been a thrill. And anytime you want to come back on, throw us a movie suggestion. We'll be happy to work out an episode. And we got some exciting things coming for us. Our next episode coming out is going to be my pick. And then we're going to have another guest on the show. And we'll announce more as time goes on our social channels. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Not That Bad Pod. And on Twitter, we are Not That Bad. M as in movie, P as in podcast. Follow us everywhere you can follow us. We're on YouTube. We're on all your favorite platforms for podcast hosting. And again, thanks for coming on the show today, Mr. Tornero. And without further ado, Mr. Tice, if you'd love to take us out.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, thanks again for listening. This was one of the most fun episodes yet. So big thanks to our guest. Please go check out his content, and then you can catch us on his channel at Flopbusters right after we drop this episode. So with that being said, I'm Gabe, one of the Gabes.
Yeah,
and this is Not That Bad, signing out.